my friends. It's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco with you again, and it's time for another amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. So first, I want to thank everybody who has been watching this series of videos that I've been doing, looking back at the art of the Amazing Spider-Man comic book series, going all the way back to the very beginning with Amazing Spider-Man 15. If this is your first time to my channel or the first Spider-Man video that you've seen, I would say go ahead and go to the playlist that I have here on the channel and look at those earlier episodes. There's a lot of stuff in there that I continue to reference as we go through these issues of Spider-Man, talking about the art, the artist, the mechanism of making comics, the psychology of storytelling within comics, all of that kind of stuff. So if you are, like I said, if you're new, I've got the playlist. Check them out. If you're here for the rest of the series, thank you again. I appreciate all your support. So today we are going to look at the Amazing Spider-Man number 7. And this is an interesting one for a couple of reasons. It is the first issue of Spider-Man that has a returning character, a returning villain, which is kind of interesting and why they would choose this villain. There is also some interesting stuff in regards to the art. And obviously we'll get into that in just a moment as we look through. So thank you again. If you have the opportunity, please like, subscribe, and leave me any comments that you have regarding the videos, any thoughts. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, if you have questions about it, if you're an art fan, if you're a comic book fan, let me know what you think. I do check for all of those. And again, thank you for your support. So in the meantime, let's get to the comic. So here we have the Amazing Spider-Man number 7. And as I've mentioned in all of my videos, this is a scanned PDF copy of the original comic. So one of the things is, of course, it has aging. You can see in the cover, there's some yellowing of the paper. There's nicks and cuts. The coloring has faded some, but I mean, it's very impressive to see this level of vibrancy to the hue of the color. So I think it's a really accurate representation of what this would have looked like when you bought it at the time when it first came out. So here we have Spider-Man and the Vulture return. And as I mentioned, this is the first time we've seen a returning villain. So far we've had Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, a Dr. Doom, the Chameleon, and the Vulture. And of all those, they brought the Vulture back first. So kind of interesting. It tells me that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko had an affinity for this character. In terms of the art on the cover here, this is sort of a reoccurring theme within Spider-Man, is seeing those green villains. So obviously vultures aren't green, but you have the opposite color of Spider-Man, so, or at least of the red. So again, if anybody has taken Art 101, whether it was elementary school, high school, etc., you've probably seen a color wheel or you've made a color wheel. And color wheel shows you that your primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, and that you can make all of the other colors out of red, yellow, and blue. So then on the opposite side of this circle, if you mix yellow and blue, you get green. So there is no red in it. So that means it is opposite, the exact opposite of the color of red on that color wheel. And so these two colors interact in such a way to make both of them more vibrant, more bright, when put together. So we see that here on the cover. You have the red of all of the writing, all of this information about the Vulture and the, here we go, fighting, joking, daring, all this kind of stuff. And then you have the green of the Vulture against the red of Spider-Man. So very nice there. The motion, the characters, in terms of how they're drawn, with Spidey's arms out and overlapping, and then drawing your eye into the feathers on the wing, which leads you down to this single bright spot of the Vulture's face and that evil grinning face. So nice design. I think, again, for the time, there's a lot of this text on the cover that we don't see in today's comics. I would have loved to see both of these characters a little bigger, which you could do if you took out the bottom text here. But this is very much a sign of the times that the comic was made. Nice angle on the city too. You have, so it tells you that it's up in the air. They're up high. And it gives you that perspective that the tops of the buildings are fading away. So that's pretty cool. I did note there, to me, at first glance, I found this foot on Spider-Man to be kind of strange. And let me zoom in just a couple clicks here so we can see what I'm talking about. So you can see the web of the costume comes down, and then underneath you have this blank. So that's the bottom of his foot. There's no webbing design on the bottom of Spider-Man's foot. So that means that this outside leg this is the outside of his thigh, the outside of his knee, the outside of the calf, and then we also see the bottom of the foot. So it's really turned at kind of a strange angle. And you think about, like, put your foot in that direction, your leg and foot in that direction, it's hard to show the bottom of that foot. Your leg naturally wants to turn. Now, Spider-Man, of course, has superpowers. He's much more flexible than a regular human. It just seems like it's a little bit weird. It would be more natural to see the bottom of a left foot if those legs were switched, meaning that your right leg would be here, your left leg would be angled, and you would be able to see the bottom of the foot from the view of the viewer. So to me, it's a little bit of a funky, weird thing, but just something to note. Nobody's perfect, and so sometimes a simple anatomy kind of mistake is there, and it's comics, and we sort of overlook it, and we move forward, and we enjoy the story and the rest of the art. So very interesting composition. I do like this, the way the Vulture's wings come up and surround the copy here of noting his return. So that's a nice design element as well. So we'll get into the comic. And of course, as I mentioned, this is the scan of the original, so we will have things like the ads from the original run. And every issue so far of Spider-Man has started with a splash page showing a scene or montage or something from the issue itself. And so this is a scene from the issue, but it is a little weird. A couple things. One is having the Vulture be backwards. So normally, if you're doing something where you would want to highlight your characters, you really wouldn't show their back to us. Now, even on the cover, Spider-Man's back is to us, but we can still see that eye and the side of the face. So we know that it's Spider-Man, and it's still enough that it's not like he's totally facing away from us. But here, the Vulture is 100% facing the other way. And so you have this back and the back of the head. It's a little weird. Something that, but based on the pose and what's happening, which we will see in the comic itself, that could be hard to avoid. I mean, the way that the characters are positioned, one of them is going to have to show their back. I don't know another angle you could use. So then you start to go, okay, maybe there's another scene or that we could have depicted. Again, choices and 2020. The other part to remember about comics is these are being made monthly. So when you have a comic book that has 20 to 22 to 24 pages of storytelling in it, it has to be drawn, it has to be inked, it has to be colored, it has to be scripted, and it has to be lettered, and then it has to be printed. So most comic artists, certainly today, and through a lot of the history of comics, there's some notable exceptions. Typically could draw a full page in a day, sometimes two. So if you have a whole day and you have to get this done in a month, but you have 22 pages to draw. That's 22 days. So it doesn't leave much margin for error. So the reason I bring that up is, could there have been another angle to get this done? Could we have drawn the Vulture in such a way, or picked another scene to show Spider-Man and the Vulture in a tense action scene that wouldn't have one character's back to the camera or to the viewer? We could have, but sometimes you have to pencil, or you have to draw the page and move on, because there's time. It's just a matter of time. So here we go. And then I'm also going to mention this foot again. It's the same thing as on the cover. Again, it's awkward to have this outside leg turned up and then the angle of the foot also doing so where you see the bottom of it. A little strange, but again, obviously, so that's something that must be an idiosyncrasy of Steve Ditko, because we've seen it on the cover and we've seen it here in the splash page. So there we go. So now we'll move into the story. Nice recap of what happened the first time they fought, and how Spider-Man used his scientific knowledge to negate the wings, how the Vulture's wings worked, because they're mechanical, right? It's not just feathers. There's a mechanical magnetic component to it. And so the Vulture is planning to break out of prison in his revenge. Now, one of the things that came to me right away with this, there's a couple here that I want to point out, and I'm going to zoom in here. The panels are relatively small. I've talked about this in other videos. Again, for anybody who's new, comic book pages are, and I'm assuming these are drawn in the same scale as the ones we are today. Maybe it might have been bigger, might have been smaller, but I'm assuming it's the same size. The actual panels are drawn within a 10.5 by 15 inch area on a overall page that's 11 inches across by 17 inches down. So that gives you your borders and all that kind of stuff. So 2 pages equally spaced apart with this gap in the middle, which is called a gutter. That's what the white space that breaks the panels. So if you have 10.5 inches across, you would have roughly about 5 inches for each of these panels, and about 1/4 inch or less with the gutter. So somewhere in there. So this is a 5 inch by 5 inch panel, which is not super small. I've drawn plenty of these, and there's no problem in getting detail, but Steve Ditko, who drew this issue, looks to really be simplifying. Now, in the past, I've really noted how he makes his characters, all the faces are very unique. He gives real characterization and facial expressions and things to all his characters. So the Vulture looks like the Vulture, which is kind of cool. He has a real neat look, but it's a very simplified face. The ear is just a half a circle with sort of a squiggle in it. He's drawn a couple lines for, the wrinkles. Look at this guy. This guy's just like a square. Now, it's a neat face in terms of being unique, but the line work is extremely simple. And in the background, this guard is literally like a couple of dots, his eyes, nose, maybe a mustache or mouth. Same thing, this guy here is just a sort of a blob. Now, it works. We read it as faces. It doesn't have to be super ultra detailed, but it's not the same as what we've seen in previous issues from Steve Ditko. So I have some thoughts on it, and I'll come back and I'll let you know, what my thoughts are there. And it all internal speculation. I have no idea if I'm right or not, but we'll see. The shading also, like, you scroll down here to this panel, so you can see the Vulture is in a jail cell, and they've established that there's not a lot of lighting, right? So it's very dark up above. There's probably, it looks like maybe some moonlight or light, not strong sunlight coming through his window. So there's a lot of shadows. So the underneath of him is very shadowed, but look how broad and sort of flat these shadows are on this cloth. It almost looks like, and it probably was done with a brush. So you'd have a fairly thick brush, and you could do those lines. Today, we'd look at like a large marker and say that looks like marker marks, as opposed to the finer lines that you would see somewhere else. Here's another example over here. This is, again, not quite 5 inches because this panel isn't quite halfway. So this is maybe 4-inch panel, and you have this one central face in the middle. So he's got plenty of room to put as much detail as he wants. There's very little detail in the Vulture, which, again, I'm not used to seeing from Steve Ditko's faces, and I'll point out later, but there's usually a lot more to it. Now, the expression is really neat. He's kind of squinting and looking out the side. The eyebrows are great, but again, something looks a little different. The other thing I noted in this issue that we'll see is this is very clear to me, and we'll see it in a couple specific panels, that Spider-Man's costume is now clearly red and blue. So if you've seen my earlier episodes, you'll know I kind of speculated that the earliest issues of Spider-Man made it look like possibly the costume was designed to be red and black. Anytime he goes into the shadows, the red stays, all of the rest of it turns black. There's very little of the blue element. It's just certain highlights, and even sometimes it looks like it's colored potentially gray. Here it is very clearly blue, and we see that there's a lot less shadow on that part of Spider-Man's costume, which tells me that it's not black with blue highlights. We've now moved to a blue area of the costume with black shadows. So something to note there. We kind of made that transition, it looks like. So Spidey is going to have to tackle the Vulture, and he's very confident because he's beaten him once before. This is great here on this page here. Actually, hang on a second. Let's go back. Oh, again, so if I'm looking at my notes, if you have seen any of my earlier videos, one of the things that was very predominant, and I believe we do see some of these later in this issue, but the early comics were very much worked on a grid. The panels formed a very straight up and down grid. So you take your page, you divide it in half, so there'd be one gutter that would run all the way straight through the center, and then you divide it into sections, thirds, half. So did you want 4 panels, 6 panels, 9 panels, however you want to do it, but they were all very, very much in a grid. And this is one of the first times that we've really seen what I call offset panels. So looking over here at the first 2 panels, at this whole page, the gutters do not line up, the center gutters don't line up exactly down the middle of the page. It's offset. So you have a large and then a small, 2 even, and then a small and a large. That variety really does help the reader to create, to be more interested. When you see things that are, every panel is exactly the same size, things tend to blend together, and it's hard to emphasize maybe what's more important. Or why would one panel have a very small figure and then the next panel have a very large figure, even if they're the exact same size. So this is a little variation in storytelling that we haven't really seen so far in some of these early Spider-Man issues. So the offset panels, we see more over here, right? So the Vulture escapes. We have nice scenes of him flying in his makeshift escape uniform. Then we cut to Peter dealing with his classmates and finding out about the Vulture. So we have a couple of beats of he's dealing with a ball, and then he hears the radio, and then he's got to come up with an excuse why he has to leave. And that's nice where that's in a different size of panel across the board. So nice opportunity to see some offset panels like that. That's nice. Let's see. So this one I was going to say I really like. I'll zoom in. I really like the web shooters here. So you can see the detail that Steve Ditko has put in to like this web shooter nozzle and the grip and the trigger mechanism that shoots the webs. So there's like a little switch, and it shows how it could be depressed. And then here it almost looks like a little, either weld beads or like a little gear behind, or maybe a washer flange. And then you can see the inside. You can see the lines maybe where he could adjust, whether that's the how the web comes out, the spray of the web. Really, a really nice moment to show us that intricate detail of something that is so important to the character and so unique to the character. And I really find it interesting that Steve Ditko would take that kind of time and care to really show us that mechanism of something that, and it looks like it would work, right? It looks like something real. It looks industrial. It looks like something we've seen before in real life. So I really like that piece a lot. Again, talking about the faces and the inking and that kind of stuff. So, so far, to my knowledge, Steve Ditko is the only artist credited in these early issues. So all the early episodes I've done, he's the only one that's listed as an artist. So you assume he draws the book in pencil and then goes over and inks, does all the black and white ink lines, and then somebody comes in and colors, and that color is just probably uncredited. However, this doesn't look like some of the same inking technique that Steve Ditko has used on other issues. So it makes me wonder if maybe was this issue running late? Was he behind and had other people help him? Or did he simplify his style at times just to get it done on time? Again, total speculation on my part. But what I'm looking at in terms of things that are different are things like some of these faces, and the simplicity of that is very unlike what we've seen before. The hair on the back of the head of this gentleman, very different than some of the stuff we've seen. And then this vulture face, again, it's a fairly large size panel. There's plenty of room there to get in there and detail out, like, the vulture's ear, the head. You could make him slightly larger in the foreground. That'd be okay. But it looks like all the lines are kind of the same. There's a little bit of line weight on the ear of all things. But overall, it just sometimes looks like there's different inkers sharing some of the inking duty on this comic. And then here's what I was talking about with Spidey, where it's clearly blue. There's essentially almost no black. There's a little bit on the arms here, the shadow around the knee. But I mean, the entire back of his legs and back is all clearly a very bright blue. And so that tells me, we've moved into the classic red and blue era of the Spidey costume for sure. So let's zoom back out and keep going here to the next page. On panel 4, so you can see, right, as I mentioned earlier, we've got the offset panels. We have some that are this size, and then back to the grid. And the grid in this case is fine. Again, we've talked about this in earlier episodes. Having a grid of exactly same size panels really helps with the rhythm and pacing of fast action. So the vulture is spotted. He turns and zips away. He's trying to evade the helicopter, so he zips through building rooftops and things that the helicopter can't follow. Turns a corner, goes through the open window, and turns out, just out of luck, he's in a jewelry shop and he's going to rob them. So that pacing, and then boom, he grabs it and he's out the window and now he's escaping. So that's all happening in a rhythm, in a fast action movement over boom, boom, boom. And that grid helps us to do that. When you want to show that time is different or things take time between panels, that's where having different sizes, different configuration, different composition of the panels can really help you. This one has a very fast rhythm to it. I really enjoy panel 4 here, the image of the vulture holding up the jewelry store. I like that body position and the body language. Having him close to the camera, you're not looking over his shoulder, but sort of at his shoulder. And so a little behind, but having the right perspective of drawing, close to us is large. As you go away, it goes small and fades in. We can tell that, so he should be larger in the foreground, and this guy over here should be smaller in the background. So really nice. I like this panel a lot, just from that simple body language and storytelling. That part's really cool. So we cut through some ads, and now we have our interaction. Again, we're still looking at that grid because of the pacing. Everybody's chasing him, Spidey spots him, and now it's time to swing into action, thinking he's going to defeat him in the same way. Now, this is where, for me, this tells the difference. So again, this panel, all these panels are half a page wide, roughly. And so there's plenty of room in here, and you can see now more of that Steve Ditko detail that we're sort of used to. The little hatch marks that blend the dark shadow into the light area. That's what those are for. Because at the time, the coloring didn't really allow for what we would call today gradation, or a gradation, to go from a dark color to a light color without a line in between them. You could kind of only print one color. So you could see like the light green and the dark green are separated by a line. So yes, we could do darker facial or darker skin tones to indicate the shadows, but they didn't have that technology at the time, the way we do today with modern printing and modern coloring techniques. So how did you do it? You added black ink, because you could always have the lines go over the color. And then you add in these hatch marks, and that helps to essentially, hatch marks are gray, if you will. It reads as gray because you see color in between the black lines, and your eye reads that as an in-between. So it's not the pink up here, it's not or peach, it's not the black shadow, it's something in the middle. So that gives us that, what we call shading or rendering kind of look, and we've got that all across. So we know that the light is coming down from above, and that he's got shadows under these cheeks, where he's got kind of, because he's smiling, there's still some fat in those cheeks, but then we have all these wrinkles because he's an older man. So this is a great Ditko face. This is what you kind of expect, that we don't always see throughout the whole issue. And again, I don't know if there was an inking assist or something like that, but maybe him just moving fast. I don't know. Again, it's all speculation. So we've got our fight, and then this one. So I do. We'll talk about the vertical panels in a second, but this second panel where the Vulture's pretending to fall, an upside down face, and an upside down face of a very caricatured face. I mean, the Vulture's face is very unique. Again, a great ode to Steve Ditko's ability to draw characters as opposed to everybody looking the same. This is incredible. I mean, you can see his Adam's apple and the lighting coming from the other direction, the shadow along the nose and the forehead, where the wrinkles would be. His eyes are kind of squinched up because gravity is pulling the other way. I mean, that's a really hard angle to draw. And I suppose you could, if you could get a friend to stand upside down and take a picture of him for a reference, more power to you. Especially back then, before digital photographs, you wouldn't be able to see it. You'd have to go have it developed, and so I think this is out of his head. But that's a really tough angle, and he pulls it off amazingly. And then we have these big vertical panels, and we've seen them do that before. We saw it in a previous episode with the lizard, where they're fighting in a very narrow tower. So the shape of the building is a tower and very vertical. But when you have this, the Vulture is flying up this building, and so he's really emphasizing the vertical nature, the height, and the motion that really pushes our eye and up and makes us feel like he's really zooming up into the comic because of these vertical panels. So I really like that usage. It's something that we see a lot later. There's another artist, Spider-Man artist in particular, that I'm thinking of, that really did a great job when drawing panels of New York and the city and stuff love to use those vertical panels like this to emphasize the height and the vertical nature of New York City, how these buildings just shoot up into the sky. So very, very nice here as well. He's done a great job. Again, we have some rhythm of the grid. Now this, so, and again, here's another, so this one is again, more of what I expect from Steve Ditko, even in a small panel. So we have a small panel here. It's, again, the same size, maybe a 5-inch panel, but the faces are, to me, seem much better. We have some, you can see a little wrinkle. There's the divot under the nose and the turn of the lips, building, that shape, the 3D shape with some line work, feathering to the hair. This hair is slightly different. This guy's face is different than this guy. The ladies' faces are different. You see the shadow under this arm. There's a large dark shadow, but then there's also some smaller ones as well. It's not just all big blocks. It's not all the same. This to me looks like a more traditional, what I expect from Steve Ditko faces in a 4 or 5 inch panel, as opposed to the other ones we looked at. So yeah, and as well, nice use of what we call a low angle. So again, you pretend like, if you're thinking movies, television, or just imagine that all these panels, these drawings, are made by photographing people and then putting all the photographs together into a story. You would have to be low. The person taking that picture would have to be down, probably on their knees, sitting on the ground, looking up at these onlookers and taking that picture up. So that's what we call a low angle shot. And you can see the buildings rising up behind him, and really, again, emphasizes that they're looking way up in the sky, to emphasize the height of what's happening with the Vulture and Spider-Man. So great low angle shot there. Very nice. We then have the panels here, and Spidey falls because he's way up too high and there's nothing for him to web to, and he lands hard on the roof. And now you have this cool shot here of the Vulture on this either flagpole lamp. I think it's supposed to be like a lamp post maybe, or some sort of light, post, addressing everybody crouched down. Really cool concept, and the wings look great, and how he's looking down at everybody is great. I wish, for me, I'd like to find a way to see the Vulture, and see his face. So what most people, so when you think about, again, television, movies, theater, live theater, anybody who's performing to an audience, you never really turn your back to the audience, because your back can't emote. There's no face, there's no facial language, there's nothing like that. You can do some body language stuff, but you might lose some of the message. Where, imagine if we took this panel, turned it around, did another one of these low angles, so we're looking maybe at the back of these people, which is okay, because these aren't the important people in this image. It's the Vulture, and we're looking up at a Vulture who's grinning from ear to ear, as evil as you can imagine, because he's won and he thinks he's unstoppable. Like, what a powerful image that would be. Kind of a lost opportunity. Showing the back of this character doesn't give him the most threat, the most shine, the most, emphasis. So to me, I would like to see that differently. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to move on. So Spider-Man has injured his arm, and now he has to go home and try to figure it out and not let Aunt May hide him or find him that he's injured, or that he's in his Spider-Man costume. And so she comes into his room because she thought she heard something, and he sticks to the ceiling because nobody ever thinks to look up at the ceiling. That's a great trope that we've seen in the movies. cartoons, additional comics, etc. Great Spider-Man trope. Nobody looks at the ceiling, so he can hide in plain sight by just sticking to the ceiling and staying real quiet. So he has to fake this injury. He tells his aunt that he got hurt playing volleyball, and he's got a sprained arm, and it's going to be okay. So that's another trope, because how does Peter Parker explain all these things to people? So he's got to come up with funny excuses. He tripped, he fell, he got hurt playing volleyball at school, a dog tripped him, whatever. There's always these crazy things, like people must think he's the most accident-prone human being they've ever known. But, of course, we know he's not. So that's pretty funny there. Again, so here you have, and I know I keep harping on this, but it's such... I found it to be surprising. It wasn't something that I remembered, because I remember reading a reprint of this when I was a kid. So, obviously not the original. It was decades later, but I remember reading this as a kid, and I didn't remember the difference in the artwork. So I'm looking at it as an adult who understands and knows how comics are made and the artists that are involved, and it shocked me how different some of the inking and some of the depictions were, some of the drawing style was, compared to what we've seen before. So that's why I keep harping on this thing about the inking. But look at Peter here. So this panel, or even this whole row, right? So we have 3 panels, and so these are all appear to be roughly the same size. So again, divide 10.25 inches or 10.5 inches in thirds. So you're really a little bit about 3.5 inches, give or take. But look how much different the detail is in some of these faces compared to like what we saw from the earlier pages with the Vulture, the guards at the prison, etc. Like, this isn't a very big image of the Doctor, but we can see he's got a smile. There's a little crease on the side of his cheek where his smile has kind of a little dimple. He's got a cleft in his chin. We could see the shape of his nose. We have Aunt May here. She has got a very unique shape to her face as well. And even Peter, it's some simple lines, but it's readable as Peter. And then here, this isn't a huge image. Again, it's the whole panel is only maybe 3 inches wide, a little over 3 inches wide. But we've got the way that he uses, his eyebrows, the slight wrinkle of the forehead, showing that he's raising his eyebrows up. The way the mouth curves, and you have a little crease in the corner. The little hatching under the chin, on the neck to indicate, your Adam's apple. The lines of the hair, the feathering to give you where it's dark, and then there's a highlight where the light has hit it, the brown. I mean, there's a lot more happening in even these small faces that are roughly about the same size as the ones we saw earlier that seem to be inked really roughly. So that's what that to me says maybe there's some other hands that were involved in this, which is totally normal. So you start to look in the history of comics, it's something that we find a lot. Artists, there were ghost artists, people, the regular artist was sick. The regular artist had an accident. The regular artist was needed a break, a vacation, or whatever. And you'd have another person come in and draw sort of in their style. Or maybe Steve Ditko could have been like, hey, I don't have time to pencil and ink. So he did rough pencils, which would be very blocky, simple shapes. And then somebody in what they used to call the Marvel bullpen, so people who worked at the Marvel office themselves, maybe that got handed out and somebody came in and finished the inks on the panels or pages that Steve couldn't get to. That kind of thing happened all the time and often went uncredited. Let's see here. Oh, this page and this Vulture face is awesome. So I love it. I love the like, it looks like he's biting his lower lip here. I'm going to zoom in. I think it's so cool. Um, what a great face. So is he smiling, or like I said, is he biting his bottom lip? Um, the shading and the wrinkles under the eyes, and the fact that he's thinking to himself, but he's looking right at the reader. That is awesome. I love this image, this depiction of such a cool looking different character. You can see the knuckles. He's older, so he's a little bony. Look at the bone in the wrist. So everybody has, you hold up your wrist, this little bone here right before the little bones of your wrist, this little lump at the end of your arm. Great, cool detail that a lot of people wouldn't think to put in there. Just fantastic. Really, really cool face. I really like that one a lot. There's another thing I liked a lot too, which is this depiction of the vulture without his wings. So I always thought of it as a single suit. Like he gets in the suit, he puts his arms in the sleeves, which has the wings, he sort of zips it up and he goes. But it turns out it's a bodysuit with a furry collar to make him look like a vulture, and then he puts the wings on like a jacket across his back. And I was like, what a neat idea. And I'm sure I feel pretty confident in saying that probably wasn't in the plot of this story, meaning, so I've talked about this before, what it's called the Marvel method. Stan Lee and probably the artist together come up with the plot, which is the Vulture escapes from prison. He goes to the city. He beats Spider-Man. Spider-Man regains his confidence and finds a new way to defeat the Vulture. Like, that's, very simple. There's your plot of your story. The details of he's hiding out in an old farm in a silo like a bird, and then when he's hanging out by himself, he takes the wings off and hangs them up. That I have to assume is just straight from the artist. Like, why you would write that particular detail, it's not relevant to the story, but it is a really cool little storytelling item that artists can add to what they're doing. So if you're an artist, if you're a comic book artist, and you're starting out, there's a good chance you'll likely follow what the writer writes to the letter, to the T. But being able to add these little storytelling elements that maybe wasn't in the script itself is what brings life, brings characterization, and makes that a real partnership of the two, of the writing and the art, which makes American comic books such a unique storytelling mechanism. Let's see. So we've got here the next thing, and Peter talking with Betty Brant, who is the secretary of J. Jonah Jameson. I think we're going to find that's an interesting future relationship, which is pretty cool. So Peter is able, instead of with his schoolmates, where people that tease him and he has to play much more mild-mannered, with Betty, he's able to be much more of himself and, kind of wisecracking and stuff, even when he's not in his Spider-Man costume. So that's kind of nice to see Peter being able to do that again as just a story element, a characterization piece. So the Vulture comes in. He wants to rob J. Jonah Jameson at the Bugle. And again, this is nice here. The two face off, yelling at each other. Again, great details, right? Very nice, and faces being very different. J. Jonah has a different shaped nose, a different, much more square type of head. The Vulture, very unique. The body language, they're leaning into each other, the hand gesture, all really nice. Again, storytelling, even without the words, you can feel what this argument is. You could make up the dialogue yourself of what this argument might be, and who's the aggressor and who's trying to reason with the other. So that is pretty cool. So, and of course, Spider-Man has a wounded arm. So this is where it comes into play. It's not really clear in the art. It's one of those things where you have to sort of read it, and we don't really see it. But he uses his webbing and sort of sticks his arm to himself. with his webbing to kind of excuse me, to make it like a function like a sling kind of. And I don't know if it was meant to be like this webbing that's under his arm, which is sort of decorative webbing. Is he talking about that? But he's definitely shooting his webs, it looks like, at his own arm. So I think that's what he's kind of sticking it to himself. So, but he's got to fight. And now we're back to that grid, that 6 panels, equally sized grid. Why? Because we've ramped up the action. We're going to go through this rhythm and this pace of movement, action, reaction, chase, dodge, new position, swing, miss, punch, all that kind of stuff is happening in a very fast pace. And so the grid makes us read it in that way and feel that way. Let's see here. Just looking at my notes. Page 19. Nice leaping pose. Spider-Man leaping over everybody. Let's see here. Let's go to the next page. Not a lot. Again, still this action, this pacing is good. Where did I put that? I know there's a. Okay, 20. Yeah. So he's in a space where he could the Vulture could move more. It's open where the printers are. Spidey jumps on him, and this is where you get that one panel that is that scene depicted in the splash page, which is interesting. As you see here, what if in the splash page, what if he, and it makes me wonder, like, what did he draw first? I'm assuming he would have probably drawn this first, because it would have been part of how he designed the page and then go back, but I could be wrong. That's the thing. Comic books don't have to be drawn in order. You could draw the pages out of order if you want, as long as you know what the story is, if it's written out, and then go back. So I don't know if this was drawn in order or not, but imagine if this is how the splash page had been, with the Vulture's back arched so his head was upside down as he's laughing, driving Spider-Man towards this big piece of machinery to try to knock him off his back. That would have solved our whole problem of why are you just showing the back of the Vulture in the splash page? That piece didn't really work for me, whereas just this one panel works way better. So I don't know. It'd be interesting. I wish there was a way to know which one was done first. Is it this panel? Is it the splash page? But clearly, to me, just as a small, again, 5x5 kind of panel, this works so much better than that splash page did. So we'll zoom back out. We're continuing the great action. I really like this pose. So Spidey gets shaken off. Vulture cuts his web, and he doesn't want to land in the printer in these rollers, big rollers, and get squished. And he manages to land on this little ledge. But I love this body language. The turn of the leg, the arch of the back. This arm is still tucked in. His right arm is still tucked in tight because it's the injured arm. So this other arm is kind of out to the side to balance. The head turn. This is really nice body language. Like, you feel like this one foot is balancing on this point, as opposed to him landing solidly. So really, really nice. I like that quite a bit. That is a great pose with great body language. So, now Vulture swoops away with Spidey, and we're back to these great vertical panels, which is terrific. Again, emphasizing the height. Look how, the city's going up, so you know that we don't even see the street. So we know we're starting here in this panel at a really high altitude. Now all you see is the little tops of the buildings. It's going higher. Now you look down and the buildings are tiny. So we're up really high. Great use of verticals. Very, very nice. Spidey webs up the Vulture's wings. So kind of realizing, like, he's pinned his arm to his side to act as a sling to immobilize this arm so he can't hurt it anymore. And he basically does the exact same thing to the Vulture. He webs the Vulture's wing to his side so that he can't spread them to glide and fly. So Nice little option there. Great solution to the problem. And then here we go. As they fall, Spidey is able to make a web parachute. Why? Because Spidey's webs can do anything Spidey needs at any time. Now, interesting that, again, Steve Ditko being the original artist for Spider-Man, this was his solution to how do you draw Spider-Man's webs. Now, when it's just a line that he's swinging around from, let's go back a couple just to emphasize what I'm talking about here. So as Spidey is swinging around here, you can see from the Vulture, now these are far shots, but this one's a little closer. It's just a line, and here you go. It's just a line. It's like a rope, right? It could be a rope. It has no texture. It has no design in and of itself. It's just a line to emphasize it is a strand of sort of webbing. Sometimes, and we'll zoom in, like in this panel up here, it spreads out a little bit and he makes some X's in there. So it's a mesh. Okay, that works. That is the visual language that Steve Ditko has established for Spider-Man's webs. And then much like here, when it's a large object, how do you do it? So he's created, it has structure lines. So there's got to be thicker webs that come out to hold it together. And then this crisscross X pattern of the mesh. Same thing here down the bottom on J. Jonah Jameson's face. Spidey's tired of hearing him, so he webs his mouth shut. It's that crisscrossing X lines. That changes over time. It'll be a long while. It'll be many episodes before we get to one of the classic Spider-Man artists that introduced a different type of webbing. I won't spoil it. If you know, you know. But the webbing does change over time based on the artist who's drawing it, and we'll see that later. I really like, so again, some vertical panels, not quite as big, but again, we're emphasizing the height that they're coming from, the city getting bigger and bigger as they drift down. Great vertical panel of the bystanders looking, and I love, love, love the cartooning. Great cartoony faces, very cool. So I think sometimes people can get uptight about being a comic book artist and being referred to as a cartoonist. Like, it's not the same thing. A cartoon is for children or for Saturday mornings or whatever, but these faces are cartoony and they look great because they have such individual expressions. This guy's face, he's got kind of bigger teeth and sort of there's a squishiness to the skin and the face there. This woman with a very pinched, kind of face, thin nose, the big eyes. This guy here with this long face, he almost is, glaring, almost evilly, but really nice design work. You can see he draws like there's a little curve or bag under his eye. The nostril, the little flare, the chin is very long. This is a great face. This guy over here, same thing. Everyone is different. The ladies are different. Terrific cartooning on the faces. A lot of times, young or new artists, as you're learning, get hooked on the mechanics of a face. A face is an egg shape. The eyes are exactly this far apart from each other. The nose is your eyes are roughly halfway between your eyes and the top is your hairline, halfway between the eyes and the bottom is the mouth, halfway between that is the nose. Like, there's all these elements that people teach in how you draw a human face, but then it creates a very generic human face that nobody actually looks like. This adds true uniqueness and real personality that I think is fantastic. That's where Steve Ditko really excelled. So that's a really, really nice job. And again, if we have any, there's no doubts anymore. Spider-Man is red and blue by this time. I mean, you can see the whole back of him is all blue in these panels here. There's a little bit of shadow. There's no doubt this is not a black costume with a blue highlight. This is definitely a blue costume with black shadows. Let's see, the bystander faces. Oh, I said nice sense of scale here. So what I like about this is, so Jana Jonah Jameson is going to yell at Spider-Man and give him a hard time. And what you've got is Spidey hanging here, him yelling, him leaning out the window, and you see these other buildings. So when I say nice sense of scale, it gives us an idea that they're in a much larger building. The building is big, and it's around these other buildings that are also really big and really tall. We can't see the top of them. You see how small the car is in the background. I think that's a really nice idea. It really helps put them not just at a window. If you zoomed in too far, they're just at a window. Like here, you're at a window. We have no idea. Is that the third story, the second story, the 50th story? It's a window. You can't tell. This really helps to emphasize and tell us this is a really large building that's up really high. So it's a nice sense of scale there for that. And then as we keep going, we come through. Peter, of course, comes back, and now he and Betty are kind of flirting. And I think we've got a nice little love interest. But she mentions the reason she does like Peter is that he doesn't pretend to be what he isn't. You don't pretend to be what you're not. And he's like, boy, if she only knew. So now we're going to create a new love triangle, in a way, if you will, between Peter, Betty, and Spider-Man. And not so much that it's not the classic like Superman Lois where she's in love with one and not the other. More of she loves Peter, but she ends up, spoilers, she doesn't care for Spider-Man for various reasons. And of course, so now he can't truly open up to her because if he tells her the secret, she won't like him. And so very interesting, nice storytelling there to add some personal elements, not just fighting, beat 'em up, superhero costume stuff, but let's give Peter a little bit of, try to make him a real person, give him a new, like I said, a new love interest, which will happen, and we'll go through the series for a little bit. And that is the end of the book, and there is our issue. So let's come back here. So there we go. So that is the Amazing Spider-Man number 7. Written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, and possibly, in my own speculation, again, I have no knowledge whatsoever either way, that there are various inkers on this issue that maybe we haven't seen before and don't know of. So it might be a mystery. Who did some of the inking? Not just Steve. So pretty cool. And again, the first returning villain issue, something we have not seen before. So pretty neat. The next issue, just to give you a little bit of foreshadowing, the next issue features Spidey, and so in two stories. There's the main story and there's a little backup story, a little short backup story, and this one does have a guest penciler. So we'll talk more about in the next issue or next episode here on YouTube about how the impact of penciler and inker and how the marriage of those two can make a better product than just one person by themselves. Or is it a better product? We'll see as we look at the next issue together in our next video. Thank you all for all of your support. I appreciate it so much. I hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you next time here for more Amazing Spider-Man art retrospective videos. Thanks so much.